An equally important matter. It's the NDLEA DG, the CEO, joins us now. Retired Colonel Mohammed Abdallah, Chairman CEO of the NDLEA, joins us from our studios in Abuja. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us today. Well, yes, indeed, it's the International Day to look at some of these challenges. But looking at some of these figures here now, this should concern everybody. International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking. But if you look at some of the data by the MBS, they reel out about 14.3 million people reported a considerable level of use of this substance, psychoactive drug substance. I know that there's been several focus on this matter and some actions have been taken. But from your perspective, in spite of all that's been done, how much of a challenge are we still faced with?
A lot, like you have rightly pointed out. I'd like you to understand that it is in spite of the existence of the NDLEA that we still have these percentages doled out. Were it not for the NDLEA, it would have been a lot worse. The world average and generally drug abuse in nations is 5%. In Nigeria, it's getting into 15%. That is not a data or a statistic we should be happy with.
Is from a report done in 2018, released early 2019. Is there any action taken so far to challenge those figures and possibly bring down the figures?
Obviously, we are not relented in our tasks as clearly enunciated in the act setting up of the agency. On the part of the government, it has taken some concrete steps to ameliorate some of the deficiencies that the agency has. For a start, Mr. President has authorized an upgrade on the staff strength of the agency. Currently, and it's been that for like 30 years, counting this year, a staff strength of 5,000. Without being told, that is not a staff strength that can fight drugs the way it should be fought in Nigeria. We are all Nigerians. Let me just mention 3 local governments, if I may. You know, most of you have lived in Lagos, or you live in Lagos. You know Mushin. You may know Fage in Kano, or even Yaya here closer in Abuja. I could deploy all of that strength, including me, and then there will be still some loopholes for trafficking and abuse to go on. That is why Mr. President has agreed an upgrade to 20,000 in phases, 3 phases precisely, which is the first step that the nation has taken, because we have seen, firstly, the manpower we have could not do it. So after the manpower strength, the next will be the logistics and the equipment, which comes naturally as a result of an upgrade in the personnel.
Well, the theme for the year is better knowledge for better care. It brings up the issue of informational conversations with the people, especially those who are vulnerable to drug abuse. Perhaps one could say that if people are well informed about the risks or dangers of drug abuse, they would refrain. Is there any conversation going on along that line, enlightening people on the risks of drug abuse? Because perhaps some people are not even aware what these drugs are that could be abused.
Certainly. We do have 2 main branches in the agency. The one that most people are familiar with is the part that deals with the interdiction, arrests, prosecution, and then conviction. The larger part of the agency, actually, by law, is a drug demand reduction component. That is bit to do with the sensitization. But like you would know, it requires an outfit, an outlet such as yours, to be able to get our message across. And you don't come cheap, and we don't have the money to be with you anytime we want. I'll be glad to be on TV, on your channel, anytime you will have me and some of the experts sensitize Nigerians about what dangers there are continuously about drug consumption.
All right, well, we'll take that, take that point home. But how would you assess the way we as a country, how we approaching this challenge?
Until a few years ago, Sister Bill, we have been playing the ostrich. As a matter of fact, we had given playing the ostrich a new name. While we have help from some of our external collaborators to stem the tide in our country, as a nation, we are almost doing nothing. But now we can no longer plead that lack of knowledge. It's very clear, like you have pointed out, it's a slide on a slippery surface toward a precipice, and Nigerians all must wake up to that danger. I think nobody's in any doubt that drugs is a menace to us. I know we are going through a pandemic universally, but the real pandemic to us Nigerians is a drug pandemic.
I mean, you have said it that this COVID-19 pandemic has caused a spike in drug abuse and also sex abuse, but sexual abuse, and focusing on drug abuse now. I mean, over the past 4 months, for Nigeria anyway, I mean, it's higher for some other countries that we've been through this COVID-19. How much has the trend changed? Because the theme for the year, like my colleague mentioned, is better knowledge. So how much has that trend changed during the period?
Okay, the theme for this year, if I may just add, is the theme for the year by the UN. Hitherto, it has been listen first, which was the themes for the past 3-4 years, which was to listen to the teeming youth who were suffering in silence, the largest segment of our population that should have been tended to by their guardians and parents, but who were not. So the idea for the past years was like, you need to listen to youth. You need to listen to them because it's a development in stages that requires attention of parents. But in our case, parenthood has become a part-time affair. People think they can just give birth to children and allow them to take care of others. That should not happen. We have aped sheepishly the concept of other people. We have nannies and guardians. If you must have a child, you must be interested. The fathers and mothers must take care of their children. I don't know how old you guys are, but I remember in my time, there's a time limit, after which our fathers, people of my age, our fathers would take a census of all the children that should belong in their house after a certain time. But how many of us do that now?
I was looking specifically now because we're seeing, pictures of some youths abusing drug. And according to a 2019 UN drug report, Nigeria recorded the highest seizure of tramadol, mainly from India and China. And that's a trend we have seen over time. In fact, you hear some songs where they expressly speak about these things, drug use and what have you. What are you doing, especially because we know where these things are coming from? In fact, Nigeria is a major hub for tramadol in the world and, in fact, a distributor for this region. So what are you doing in that regard?
It is precisely because the NDLEA was doing something. That was why that 800 million pills were intercepted. They will have been readily available to Nigerians. By the way, I think the government of India has upped its antics. They have now put more control on the supply of tramadol to Nigeria. Tramadol, if I will explain a little bit more, for normal medicinal doses, is between 50 mg and 100. The ones we have seen in Nigeria range from 200 to like 500 mg. Even a horse will be dead beat by the time it takes that. But that is what Nigerians have been taking. That is what fuels insurgency in the Northeast. Because theater commanders have testified to me that every camp they have overrun of Boko Haram, they have found paraphernalia of drug abuse, particularly tramadol. But let me say, Nigeria has always been arguing its case at the UN. Nigeria's stance is that rather than lessen or diminishing the scheduling of cannabis so that it can be legal, we have advocated that tramadol should be scheduled such that it becomes a controlled narcotic that should not be readily available being shipped to any country.
Now, before we go to this next point, could you tell us have we been able to identify where do these drugs come from such that we can begin to know how to address the challenge?
Well, you have already said it. The main supplier was India before, not counting the ones that sip across our borders from our neighbors. But precisely because we have identified those places, that is why we are able to put some form of cap on the imports.
So what should we, or what should parents be looking out for in terms of the attitude of their words and then the drugs as well, beyond tramadol?
Simple tips I give them. Besides knowing where your child or what is at any one time, make sure that their rooms are accessible to them. Politely knock and take a look. When you find them too reclusive, too quiet, and then excessively sleeping, not eating, those should be telltale signs that should ask you, first of all, to go for elementary medical check on them. Then you know that, verify that whether it's sickness, otherwise those are the tell signs of drug abuse. Secondly, the kind of company they keep. You should be concerned about who comes to your house or which house your wives and children go.
If you look at the screen right in front of you, if you can have that again, we have 90% of addictions start in the teenage years, and this is perhaps alluding to what you also just said. 27% of teens and 16% of parents believe that using prescription drugs to get higher is safer than using street drugs. Is this advice or something that gives you sleepless nights?
Yes, it does. Very much so. Even prescription drugs, once abused other than ordered by a clinician, it goes afoul of the law. I do not think any sensible person, I'm talking for adults who can take care of their reasoning now, I do not think any sensible adult should be taking prescription drugs in the name of anything to alter his behavior because he cannot get other drugs. That starts from when, like I said, you should know what your children take. If you do not have access to their rooms, you don't talk to them, bring them closer to you, you go afoul of the normal duties which you should do. Particularly now that ladies in the north have taken into this, I urge the husbands to be more open to their wives. You should know what parties your wives go to. You should know what is in their handbags. I'm not advocating that you open every day, but I think if you live as spouses with each other, you should know the kind of things, the kind of places that your spouses go to.
Essentially, you are saying we should watch over each other, which is perhaps a good thing, but which ones of these prescription drugs give you the most concern? In the 80s, when the NDLEA was set up, I think it was the issues were around cocaine and heroin, and over the past few years, we've heard about people smoking benylin with codeine and all of that. Which of these drugs should we be paying a lot more attention to so that we can bring down those figures, 14.3 million people?
The first one that worries me the most is tramadol. Tramadol is so readily available until the damper that we put by arresting this importation. Because, like I mentioned, it first an insurgency. But then the cough syrup, benylin with codeine, that appears or is illegal medication. But we need the cooperation of the chemists to make sure that they do not sell this in quantities that are beyond what a normal person suffering from the cold should be given. But where we have pharmacies and outlets willing to sell cartons of benylin with codeine, that's the kind of things you have. Well, let me explain. Benylin with codeine actually in a bottle is all right. But if we take a series of bottles, it is a cumulative consumption of these indexes of the poisonous parts of it that affects you. One bottle will not do, but now we have people who can down whole cartons. The price of a bottle used to be normally 200, 300 naira. Now, if you find it, it's going to be in the thousands. That is because we have put a damper on the sales.
You know, it's good you're putting out these things for people to know the dangers associated with drug abuse. But you know what? Let me just quickly touch on this, because sooner or later, this is going to be a major conversation. And that concerns legalization of marijuana, cannabis, or whatever name you'd like to call it. What does the current research and data tell us about that in the Nigerian context? A lot of other countries have their views, but what does it say for Nigeria?
But let me tell you summarily, and that is the standard. Believe me, every other ones you hear later will be skimming around the facts. There is no scientific evidence that there is any medicinal benefit from the cannabis. And if we do allow cannabis under the guise of any medicinal benefits, it will fall into the same trap as Benylin with codeine. You take one little wrap, you think it's medicinal therapeutic, but who knows? What is the quantity? What number of wraps will you take before cumulatively you become addicted or on the high?
But just one moment. I remember this was reported in 2018. No, it was last year, that you and the governor of Ondo State took a trip to Thailand to had engagements in Thailand on medicinal cannabis development. Isn't that so?
Yes, it is. Let me enlighten you a little bit on that. As at now in my office, I have applications from 18 different bodies seeking to come and grow cannabis for whatever reason. And my simple answer to them is no, it's still an offense in Nigeria. You wait until our National Assembly change the law before it becomes legal for you to undertake that. I went with my good friend Akeredolu to Thailand. That was because, and is still the case, Thailand is an incubator to the United Nations for sustainable development. The UN recommends that you go to Thailand to see the things that they do to substitute drugs producing centers into other beneficial things. We went to Thailand. My good friend will let you know. We were received well. We went to the equivalent of the NDLEA there, in addition to their NAFDAC. We saw what steps they are taking. They have imported only 100 seedlings. Mark my words, 100 seedlings. They were going under the control of the equivalent of NDLEA. And they had set aside 3 universities who will make research into this products coming from these 100 seedlings that to be farmed and given to 6 identified farmers under the control of the government. As at the time we went, there is no medicinal cannabis in Thailand. Thailand imported what it proposes to use in future if the scientific steps show that it's correct and good, therapeutic and medicinal, yes. Well, let me tell Nigerians, and we should all know this. This species, the stuff we have around Nigeria, curiously was imported after the Second World War by my forebearers, the military. That is a type that is found in Thailand and Burma. If it could be used for medicines, Thailand wouldn't have gone to import 100 seedlings for sampling and treating. Okay.
All right, sir. We need to go at this point, but we'll forward some messages coming through from some lawyers, including Oludare Oshinoike. He is thinking that some people in NDLEA are preventing lawyers from getting access to their clients, directed them to a particular lawyer. But again, we'll forward them to your team so that they can look into that and see if that is really happening. But we do thank you for coming on this morning, and we'll keep doing what we can to ensure that we help in any way possible to address this problem. Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Please welcome aboard to the fight.
All right.